Aloha, welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I'm so happy to be with you again today as we consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. All right, everybody. I am here today. I have a very special episode for you. I have a fabulous author, Terri Cole, with us today. And Terri has a new book out, just came out last month, and it is entitled Too Much. Now, I know a lot of you, that's going to ring a bell with you right away. And it's about addressing high-functioning codependency, a pattern of overgiving, overextending, and people-pleasing, often mistaken for selflessness or competence. And she provides insights into why people engage in these behaviors, the emotional costs, and how to break free to foster authenticity, self-respect, and healthier boundaries. The book includes self-assessments, exercises, and tools for recovery and maintaining emotional resilience. I couldn't have asked for a more exciting guest to come on because, especially this time of year, a lot of us are overdoing. So, welcome, Terri. Thank you for coming on and joining us here at Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gina.
Yeah, absolutely. After that little bit of an introduction, do you have anything you'd like to share as we get going here as to maybe how you got started with the high-functioning codependency piece of your work?
Sure. I have been a psychotherapist for 27 years. I actually was a talent agent negotiating contracts for celebrities and supermodels before that for about 8 years. But I've been doing this work for a long time. And I think that, they say you teach what you most need to learn. And that is certainly true for me. I was in therapy since I was 19. I stopped drinking when I was 21. So I've had a lot of experience on the whole, the mental health evolution, personal thing. Then, once I got out of entertainment and became a psychotherapist, I started attracting women like me, probably women like you, Gina, and women like your people, high functioning, highly competent, doing lots of things for lots of people. And that was who was attracted into my therapy practice. But what I noticed is that if I would point out to them, hey, what you're describing in this relationship is a codependent pattern, they would immediately reject the notion and say, I'm not dependent on anybody, lady. Everyone's dependent on me. I'm making all the money. I'm managing all the people. I'm getting all the stuff done that's getting done. So I knew that there was a problem that my clients didn't really understand what codependency was because they were being unduly influenced sort of by the Melody Beatty codependent no more. You have to be enabling an alcoholic to be a codependent, which of course is not true. And yes, if you are enabling an alcoholic, you are a codependent, but that is just one small sliver of this cake. And what I realized is that I actually needed to create an expanded definition that would fit modern women in particular. So I realized high functioning, what did all my clients have in common? And the same with me, is that we're super capable people, high functioning. The irony with high functioning codependency is that the more capable you are, the less codependency looks like codependency, but it's still codependency. So what I did was, as I changed the name, I didn't do it because I thought I was going to build an empire on it, although I am. I really did it because I needed to create recognition for my clients, because how could I help them if they couldn't see themselves in the problem? They're now thinking, no, it really is my partner. No, it really is my boss. I'm like, no, man, it really is you, actually.
Yes.
That's sort of how I came to it. But I think maybe it would be helpful, and you tell me what you think, if I just establish the definition of.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So according to me, high functioning codependency is when you are overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the situations, the relationships, the circumstances, finances, careers of the people in your life, to the detriment of your own internal peace. And I say that so specifically because we're all lovers and partners and mothers and daughters and sisters and citizens, right? So of course we care about the happiness of the people we love. But when you're an HFC, as we call it, you're overly invested, meaning you feel responsible for the happiness of other people, the success of other people. That's not the same as being concerned about them, right? It's healthy to be concerned. So what this book helps you do is make the distinction between what is legitimately, authentically caring and what is codependency.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, because it is not obvious. It is not obvious. Like you said, only that small sliver of the cake is what we have been focusing on for many, many years.
Yes.
This has been a long time. So there's been a lot of other people that have been suffering. Can you talk a little bit about what might be the early signs, maybe in people's lives, their daily life, what they might be looking at? Because I know there's people listening who still might be going, yeah, but that's not me. So if we could
Yes.
get an idea of what our life might be looking like if we're an HFC.
Right on. Right on for using the acronym. Well, let's talk about the traits, right? Because feel like this is an easy way that you can go, oh, yeah, actually, that is me, right? So feeling overly responsible for fixing other people's problems, giving, like going above and beyond, even when you're not asked to. Because a lot of times we're just volunteering to do things and then we're feeling underappreciated for it,
Yeah.
even though it was like my idea to do it. Always ready to jump into damage control mode. And the thing is, we're excellent problem solvers. So we get a lot of positive feedback for how smart, intuitive, like creative we are with problem solving. So of course, it also makes us want to continue going back to the well of helping people, even if they haven't asked us. Getting frustrated or angry with others when they don't take our advice. Even if we don't say anything, there's a part of us that's like, I'm giving you my grade A advice for free. I don't get why you're not doing it. You may feel exhausted. You may feel resentful. You may feel a little bit bitter for the amount that you're doing. The behavior itself looks like auto advice giving. And for me, I was completely indiscriminate. I didn't care. I could be literally overhearing your conversation on a bus. And I could be like, I couldn't help but overhear. And I would literally just tell someone, I know a great oncologist or I know a great gynecologist. I'm making suggestions to perfect friggin' strangers. I actually opened the book with a story in the introduction. And this is obviously a true story, but where I was probably 22 and I was in Long Island. It was like 10:30 at night on a Tuesday or a Monday. I would go out to see my therapist. I went to college in Long Island. I was living in Manhattan. Normal people do not do that, but whatever. I was doing the reverse commute once a week to see my therapist because I didn't want to change therapists. Anyway, I'm coming back. It's 10:30 at night. I'm on a train platform and I see this kid and he's got like a heavy metal t-shirt on and he's holding a little blanket. And immediately I'm like, what is this kid's deal? Like, what are you doing here at 10:30 at night at this abandoned train track? Hi, what am I doing there is a better question, but I wasn't asking that question. So I end up chatting this guy up on the train. His name was Billy. He was from Indiana. He was like, I got hired to drive a car across country. And then they just canceled the gig. I go, what are you doing? He's like, guess I'm just going to sleep in the station. I was like, what station? He said, Penn Station. I was like, no, you're not. Have you been to Penn Station, Billy? You're going to get mugged for sure. Keep in mind, I don't even know this guy. He goes, well, I don't know anyone in New York. And I was like, yeah, you do. You know me. I took this 19-year-old kid to my studio apartment with my female roommate. Didn't even ask her. And of course, she was also an HFC. And she was like, obviously, you couldn't let him sleep in Penn Station. I was like, right. So that might be an extreme example of feeling overly responsible for someone else's situation. Because of course, there was a plethora of other things I could have done that would have been perfectly appropriate. But because I was such a high functioning codependent, I felt responsible for making sure this kid who I just met was okay. So anyway, you may not have gone to the extreme of Billy, but think about where you have felt overly responsible for people you don't know well, could be perfect strangers, but even feeling overly responsible for the people in our lives, for our partners, for our children, for our grown children. And this again is where the overly self-sacrificing part can come in, because when you're an HFC, a lot of times we're really willing to take one for the team. You know what I mean? We see what needs to be done. Even if it means, and I had a client, this was an example from a client where back in the day when people left their house to go to work, both she and her husband would go out in the morning and he left first and his car had a flat tire. And immediately she was like, just take mine, I'll Uber, just go. Because he was already outside. But that is a typical HFC move. I will be inconvenienced so that there is not a drama with you, so that there is not a problem with you, so that there is not a conflict with you. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That actually brings up the idea of, are we doing this to protect ourselves from a conflict? Is that where
Yes.
the anxiety, can you address that a little bit? Whether does the anxiety come first or
Yes.
yeah,
The
okay.
anxiety comes first, but here's the thing. Let's talk about what it's driven by. When
Mhm.
you look at the basis of codependency, any variety of codependency, the foundation is an overt or a covert bid or attempt to control someone else's outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So let that sink in. Get what that is. We don't want our partner to be fired, even though they didn't go into work because they were hungover, and we lied about them being sick or whatever. We don't want our kid to fail out of high school, so we finish their report for them so that they don't fail. They needed that one last grade so that they can actually just graduate or whatever. Like, think about those scenarios. And one of the behaviors is anticipatory planning, where we're always thinking ahead to avoid a conflict, to avoid a problem, to avoid stress, even though that is so stressful on our bodies because we're in a hyper vigilant state, right? Of always sort of scanning. Is there going to be any problems? How am I going to handle these problems?
Not just problems for us, but problems for everybody or many people in our lives or our business or strangers on a bus, right?
Absolutely. And here, the thing about pointing that out, Gina, is that it's so much of the time, it's not ours at all,
Yeah.
but it's in our vicinity.
Mm.
And when you are an HFC, you're unclear about what is your side of the street, meaning what is my responsibility and what is your responsibility? What is it even possible for us to be responsible for? We'll talk about the anxiety, but I'm going to share a quick story of how this actually came to be for me in my life, how this concept even happened, how I even understood what the hell codependency was, because I didn't. I was like my clients. I was like, I'm not codependent. I'm like a master of the universe. Are you kidding? Like, I'm getting it all done with ease, backwards and in heels. Like, what do you mean? What is the problem here?
Mhm.
I had one of my sisters was in an abusive relationship. She was living in the woods with a guy. The house had no running water, no electricity. She was an active alcoholic. He was doing crack and was abusive. I mean, it's like an HFC's nightmare where there was no way that I could be like, good luck. My whole focus, even though I was newly married, I was a bonus mom to 3 acting out teenage sons. I just, became a new therapist, leaving my very successful career in entertainment, becoming a therapist, like having 0 clients and just starting from scratch. I had so much going on in my life, but my almost sole focus became
Mm.
rescuing my sister. And I was like, I thought that was love. I thought that was devotion. I didn't even think I had a choice. I was like, what am I going to not? I mean, I have to. And I was crying to my therapist probably the 3rd week in a row about this. And I was like, Bev, what am I going to do? I've done everything. What am I going to do? And she said, Terri, let me ask you something. What makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn and how she needs to learn it in this lifetime?
Yeah.
Mm. And I was like, very defensive and very much like, well, I think we can agree she doesn't need to do it with a jerk in the woods who's abusive, blah. And she said, Terri, I actually can't agree because I'm not God. I don't know what your sister needs to learn, but do you understand what's happening for you? And I'm like, no, obviously not. So could you clue me in? And she said, you've worked really hard in therapy for years to create a really harmonious life. And your sister's dumpster fire is really messing with your peace. And you really want it to stop. So in a way, it's like Gabor Mate talks about that I want to fix your pain so my pain will end, right?
Yes.
As empaths and highly sensitive people, other people's distress is super distressing to HFCs. So I believed her. This was a therapist I'd been with for many years. I said to her, okay, so then what is my choice? Like, what can I do? And this is the beginning of boundaries. And she said, well, you have to set boundaries. You don't have to let her talk to you and tell you all the gory details of this abusive guy, right? You can say you need to step back for your own mental health and that you love her. And that if she, Anyway, so I had the conversation, which was incredibly hard. So don't think it was easy. It wasn't. I was like bawling my eyes out, but I needed to do it and just say, hey, but if you ever want to get out, I'll always be your person. And less than 9 months later, she called and said, are you still my person? I was like, obviously, yes. I'm putting on my sneakers. Went and got her. The whole point, right? The PS on the story and the whole point of the story is that me saving my older sister, putting on my cape to be the hyper helper that I always was, to be the super, the one who's always swooping in, the golden child, the hero child. That is not as helpful or beneficial to my sister than her being the hero of her own life story.
Beautiful. Exactly. It's almost as if we are taking it away from them, their ability to do their life and learn their lessons, like your therapist said.
Yes.
Yes.
What you're saying to someone, and this is with kids too, when we jump in and overfunction for kids, whether they're teenagers or young adults or even 6-year-olds, when we're doing for them what they can and should be doing for themselves, we're literally saying, the subtext is, I don't think you can do it.
Wow. Yeah. So we're not only taking away, but we're actually subconsciously causing harm.
We really are. And I really was with my sister, which I understood through this interaction with my therapist.
Yeah.
That me throwing money at the problem and sending her books about women who love idiots or whatever I was doing, right? It's like prolonging because it's like you're temporarily removing some of the pain.
Right.
But the thing is, their own pain is the thing that they need. This is what inspires us to change, right? We need our own motivation. And so it's not for me to decide, even though that was hard. So I feel like you guys listening, you can understand that two things can exist at once. You can be a loving person. And of course, my heart was in the right place, right? My desire, yes, I did want my pain around my sister's pain to end. That's true. So that was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow because you're like, oh, I'm not Mother Teresa. There actually was another motivation there too. But it doesn't mean you're not a loving person. So what is the fix? What do we do? How do we change it? Well, we stop these behaviors. We become aware. You might just listening to this podcast might change something for you. You will not blindly go into auto advice giving every person in your life the way that maybe you have been. Just even knowing that it's so much more loving to ask expansive questions. Someone comes to you with a problem and they want your advice. Because here's the thing, we've also set ourselves up as the oracles. We're like, yes, you can come to me. I've got the answers. But instead, it's so much more loving and deepens the intimacy in your relationships when you say, I'll weigh in, but tell me, what do you think you should do? Because what you think is infinitely more important than what I think. Even if you don't know, that's still data. That's still information. Like it really, the biggest flex, I think, in relationships is being able to be in the foxhole with someone during a dark night of the soul without treating a person as a project, without trying to fix them for our own comfort, because that is what we're doing. Someone's in pain and we're like, well, I don't know why you don't just do this, or I know exactly what you should do. You don't, though. You literally don't. Maybe they need to be in a house in the woods without running water for 9 months before they come to their own realization. Just because that wouldn't be what you would do. As my therapist said, you're not God. I'm not God. She's not God. And so it's really learning to let the chips fall where they may when they're not our friggin' chips.
Yeah.
Right? We feel overly responsible. So all of this over accommodating, anticipatory planning, being overly self-sacrificing, but then kind of being martyred about it, all the over functioning that we do that can create under functioning behaviors in others. Like there is a causation here that we need to look at when we are over functioning in our relationships. I say this kidding, but it's the truth. In my 20s, I could take a perfectly functional man and turn him into an under-functioner in 2 weeks or less by being like, I got it. Don't worry, I got it. I already got it. Like that's like the mantra of an HFC is I got it. It has to be me. There's a hyper independence that comes with this affliction, where we do not love to lean on other people. Don't like it. Don't love to ask for help. Don't like it. We want to give help.
I think this is a good place to stop for today, and we will pick back up with part 2 with Terri Cole and her new book, Too Much, in episode 1091, and that'll be part 2. I'll see you there. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.